today my goal is to show everybody where Star Citizen has been going for all this time, kind of what the idea behind this game is supposed to be. They put out their own video of what is Star Citizen recently, and I'm like, guys, that really does not do like it tells people what Star Citizen is kind of trying to be. But I think we should talk here about what Star Citizen is reality-wise for all of us who play it every day, because we know that it is certainly not what they put in the trailers. It is also not a scam. It's not a terrible thing, but I would say it's somewhere in between those two. You know, it's not playing perfectly, it's playing pretty poorly, but it's doing something special. And I thought we should talk about the ins and outs of that, along with kind of where the ideas behind these things came from, right? What they laid out for this game to be in the past. And then we're also going to look at sort of the talks that they've been having lately about where it's headed for the future, how that might be a little bit different from what we've seen in these documents in the past and what we've seen just over the last several years. So what we're going to do is use a lot of these design docs to go through the game loops that they've talked about and look at how they've used to, had what they used to have in mind for them. Everything from FPS to the damage system, mining, civilian transport, ship maintenance, repair, all kinds of stuff. So we'll use these as our kind of guide. We've gone through these quite a few times on the stream here before, and we'll be looking back throughout what's actually going on as we do. First thing we're gonna do is take a couple looks at the videos that they put out before about Star Citizen. One of my favorites is the Imagine trailer. This is a trailer that I think somebody else made, an actual fan of Star Citizen made, and then Star Citizen was like, dang, this is pretty sick. We're gonna use this. So they, I don't know, bought the rights, bought it from them, whatever, paid them for it. But they were able to post it on their own YouTube channel. And it has persisted as one of, I think, the most iconic videos for Star Citizen, in large part because of the timing that it came out. Also because the title is Imagine, which is what most people have been doing with Star Citizen for quite a while. But also the song, I believe it's 7 Lions. Am I right about that? 7 Lions? It's either 7 Lions or Audi. Pretty sure it's 7 Lions though. Great stuff. Anyways, here is the first trailer to kind of get some, I don't know, some idea of what they think Star Citizen should be. Check this out. They were pretty limited on the models of ships they had back then. It's just interesting to see, like, all of the ships you see in this trailer are just the classics. No new ships. When did this come out? Oh, 2014, that would be why. No, this isn't 7 Lions. Who is this? Bro, this ship wasn't even out by the time this trailer came out. This came out years later. I mean, this just looks like a different game almost. Got that old Cuddy. There's a throwback. Look at how spindly the Cutlass Black used to look. Gained a couple pounds. Got a little more black. You know, a glow up. This is such a great scene to put at this part of the trailer. You could make an amazing version of this trailer now. We have so much more footage, so much more potential, and look at the graphics, man. Some of these shots, the game looks pretty similar, but some of the other shots like this, I got way too far back. Like, look at this, dude. It is 11 years ago, so it makes sense that it doesn't look the same, but wow. See, this is also this. Pyro 4 is the first time we've been able to even have a shot like this with the rings and the... I guess Yella kind of gives you this shot, but Yella is a moon, so you don't have like the vegetation or the atmosphere in the clouds. So it's really... That's kind of why I'm so excited about Pyro 4, because it doesn't actually matter that much to me. I don't care. Pyro 4 is not that special for any other reason than it's just freaking beautiful to look at. And we don't have that yet. So this was a trailer that was put out, I can't believe, 11 years ago at this point, to sell the idea of what Star Citizen is going to be. And we're now 11 years after this and we're still imagining. But, you know, there's a lot of things that you can do and a lot of things you still can't. I mean, everything in this trailer, basically, except for like some of the escape pod kind of stuff, is in the game, but it's still not connected. You're still not living in a universe. The game that this kind of implies is also sitting behind the action. So, from here, I want to go back to kind of what Chris was saying in 2018 about where the game was coming from. And then we're going to throw this into a bit of a Q&A kind of thing. So I'll be going over the Shipyard articles and talking about the gameplay from before, but also we'll be looking at questions that are coming up in chat and answering the more specific stuff that does come up about where the game has gone and where it's headed. But this is going to be Chris talking a little bit. I'm going to put this on a little bit faster because it's a lot. This is him talking a little bit at 2018 about where he thinks the game is headed. This isn't like specifics like mining and things like that, but it is enough to still give you an idea of, you know what? Actually, before we do this one, let me give you the early version of it. The Star Citizen overview. We're going to skip throughout this one because we watched chunks of this in the past, but this is actually the original pitch. So this, like, I'm going to put it out there right now. Things are not going to be what they said they were going to be back in 2014. So we're going to read and hear a lot of the things today that aren't necessarily true now. It has to do with the way the game exploded in size because of planets. It has to do with the fact that they tried to expand the player count with server meshing and stuff. They went a little bit deeper into certain parts of the game, and they also just introduced more features that bloated the project a little bit. But this will give you an idea of sort of where it started and where it was headed. The issue wasn't a YouTube issue, but I can't restream from this computer to YouTube, unfortunately. Good to see you over here on Twitch, though. I am a space sim. I am space sim. It gets confusing because it talks about I am a space sim, I am a PC game, all these things, but, well, you'll hear it. Ah, God, dude, this song just keeps going. So dramatic. Just blew your eardrums out with my anime sounds.
Hi, I'm Chris Roberts. Ever since I saw Star Wars as a wide-eyed 8-year-old, I dreamt of being a hotshot pilot saving the galaxy or a lovable rogue making my way across the cosmos. It inspired me to make Wing Commander and has influenced everything I've done since then.
Why is your ship beeping
10
so
years
much?
ago, after 20 years of making games, I was burned out, so I took a break. But I never stopped playing games nor loving them. And now, I'm ready to come back, and I'd like to show you something I've been working on. But I don't want to build any old game. I want to build a universe. I want to build a game I always wanted to build, but I didn't have the tools to do until now. One that you can fly off a carrier fighting a heroic war on the front lines, but also one that you can muster out and find your own fortune in the stars wherever your spaceship takes you. I want to be able to share this experience with my friends and fight against real opponents in space, not just AI. And I want this to be as good or better than any other game out there. And I want to actively push the boundaries of what you can do in a game.
So far, doing okay. We're staying on board, right? He wants a space game that allows him to play with his friends, engage against other players or AI, lets him take on military sort of missions in populated areas, and lets him go out on his own in a ship somewhere else to like make your own living. That's kind of like, that's still the vibe we're getting from Star Citizen.
None of this would have been even possible 2 years ago. But with Moore's Law driving PC performance and cost and the gaming community embracing talented developers via crowdfunding, I believe it is possible today. I've never been accused of having a small vision. And so I thought it was best if I share my ambition with you visually. I'm pretty excited by how it's joined out. So why don't you come join me for a sneak peek?
Chris, be careful on the flight deck. Gosh, that's so like, what if he didn't even have a helmet on? Love these sound effects.
I want to bring the space sim back. I want to bring the space sim back to the glory that it used to be in the 90s when I was making the Wing Commanders and when I was doing games like Privateer and Freelancer. But I want to utilize today's technology. I want to have the power of a cutting-edge PC with a GPU that can push millions of polys, connected to the broadband where you can play with thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions.
What is that? Hey, Mom, what's this? That's where we have to stick all of the games into the computer, kids, because we didn't know what the internet was back then.
Millions of other people around the world in a sort of shared immersive experience. And now I think with Star Citizen, I really can deliver that. We're going for something that's a little bit different than, say, a traditional MMO, and obviously different than just a single player game. What we're calling is a shared persistent experience. It is actually a combination of the single player experience and the multiplayer experience.
Okay, that's a pretty fucking big point right there. I'll go back and play it again so you guys can hear it.
And obviously different than just a single player game. What we're calling is a experience. And now I think with Star Citizen, I really can deliver that. We're going for something that's a little bit different than, say, a traditional MMO.
So this is the introductory video, right? He's already calling it an MMO. So he has that idea in his mind, but also there's this extra bit.
And obviously different than just a single player game. What we're calling is a shared persistent experience. It is actually a combination of the single player experience and the multiplayer experience. Every player in the Star Citizen game is in the same universe. We don't have different shards or worlds, and you have a life, you have a character, you have multiple characters, they have multiple ships. So you have a bigger goal. You're basically going about making your name and fortune in the galaxy.
Okay, couple things there, pretty important. First was he mentioned everybody is in the same shard together. I don't think that's happening anymore, but they are still shooting to do as good as they can, and that's the what is it called? The worm, the worm in your head or whatever, the little thought in the back of the mind that he says there, that like we want everyone in the same shard. That's what eventually turns into the struggle that is server meshing a full 7 years later. But we're seeing the beginnings of it here. So he also mentioned there that this is both a single player and multiplayer game. A lot of people will tell you that like Squadron came first. We're supposed to get a single player game and we don't. Star Citizen, nothing. Other people will say, oh, Star Citizen, we're just getting an MMO. Like nobody came in for the single player game. They weren't going to do that. Both of them were included. It was all one game. You were supposed to be able to play through your squadron story in the same universe that Star Citizen would happen, which, you know, in hindsight, and probably to a lot of people without hindsight, is kind of insane. And that's why they split them off into 2 games. I believe a lot of that restructuring happened because of Aaron Roberts, actually, but that was eventually split into 2 separate games, Squadron 42 and Star Citizen. Squadron 42 being the military campaign, Star Citizen being the open world MMO with other players. So little bits of changes here and there from this initial pitch, but you can see that it's still following kind of what he was setting out.
So Squadron 42 is the single player experience in the Star Citizen game and world.
The interesting bit that has become knowledge to us now, and I think a big change from Star Citizen, is that what they're doing here is kind of making it seem like Squadron is the main story. But because they split it out, suddenly you had Star Citizen, this empty void of like, is it a sandbox? Is it just going to be a bunch of random missions? And what they've revealed now with Star Citizen 1.0 is that they have plans for a full main storyline that I think is kind of taking the place of Squadron. And that on its own feels like really big bloat. Because essentially you're taking what the experience that could have been Squadron, which was your single player story-based mission in Star Citizen, making that its own standalone game, but not necessarily leaving the void there. You're now filling that space with more gameplay and missions. So they're giving themselves more work. Granted, that's part of why it's taken so long, and we hopefully as players will benefit from getting more content. But I do think that's a really big change to Star Citizen that should probably be remembered, is that they really expanded this whole project when they split the 2 games out and when they introduced planets. And obviously we could see that when they talk about, oh, now you can earn citizenship in another way in Star Citizen, because like that was supposed to depend on Squadron. Why you think SC's the best SC streamer? He has all the info from the original source and shows it rather than just saying that's what they said. It's fun to look at. I mean, where can we find this much referenceable data about something, let alone a video game?
And Star Citizen itself is the multiplayer persistent universe experience where you'll adventure around in a galaxy with hundreds, thousands, potentially millions of other players. They both can
potentially, he just like throws that out there, potentially millions of players
coexist in the same world. So
is this a hot plate? This looks like the hot plates I used to use in Chemistry 1 in university.
Squadron 42 is a narrative single-player story that will lead you into the open sandbox game that Star Citizen is. So the single-player campaign in Squadron 42 unfolds very similar to the way Wing Commander did. So Wing Commander was set up in such a way that depending on how you performed the missions or how you interacted with your wingmen and pilots, it would determine...
I think this is the next graphics update.
Sort of how the story evolved. So your actions sort of affected the narrative of the story. We're doing that in Squadron 42 to a level of fidelity and detail.
Okay, wait, hold on. What the was that?
We're doing that in...
Any Star Citizen historians in chat? What is this? Is that like the old Reliant or something? The scimitar? Drones? Yeah. Did I just shock you? I'm sorry. What is this? These are drones? No. There's an asset they bought. It looks like a weird ship just like sitting. It doesn't look human even. That's interesting. Okay.
Squadron
Seahorses,
42
I'll take that.
to a level of fidelity and detail more than we ever did in Wing Commander. So definitely your actions will affect and evolve how the story goes, as well as how your relationships with your co-pilots are and other people aboard the carrier that you're based on. One of the things I'm most excited by...
Yeah, it's a good call they broke out Squadron from Star Citizen. That would have been terrible to try and make Squadron work in the same environment that Star Citizen works.
Wing Commander experience is that we're enabling cooperative multiplayer in the single player experience. So
I don't think that's happening. That was on the Kickstarter page and it was a thing from the very beginning, but I don't think they're going to do co-op in Squadron. I think you kind of have to get that in Star Citizen now.
As long as you're connected online, your friends, say in your friends list that are, in the community, you interact with on our website, they can drop in to your game if you want them to and play the roles of the wingman and the missions you're taking and help you achieve your goals and missions. But I just think it adds a whole new dynamic to the narrative in a game like Squadron 42. So I think it'll be a really cool feature. If you like Wing Commander as a single player experience, Squadron 42 is like the next generation of that. The ambition and the scope of Star Citizen makes it pretty unique in the fact that I think we're starting.
This dude was speaking to people's souls when he said things like that. And he knew it. He knew it. This Kickstarter popped off generally from people who liked Wing Commander and Freelancer and stuff.
With 100 star systems, and each star system can have multiple planets, each planet can have multiple landing locations, and all of that sort of rendered and built in a completely sort of high fidelity first person viewpoint. So when we're down on the planet, we're running around in first person. We can go into the bar and we see other players or AI characters, and we can talk and converse with them and get missions. We can walk out of there, go to the ship dealer and buy a new ship. You can walk to the landing pad where your ship's sitting and get into it all in first person, sit down in the cockpit, take off, go out into space. So there's a level of sort of.
So there's definitely a focus again. And I mean, it rings true. Like, this is 11 years ago, but it still sounds like what they like to talk about now. They are just trying to make it immersive, all the different kinds of way that Chris can say, I want you to be immersed in a space environment, he's doing over and over. But he wants it to be a first-person environment where you can still go out into space and explore different ships and cities and get missions and talk to NPCs and stuff. Like, I almost want to say, duh, because it's a very, live in space. But the first pitch was basically just that. Like, this is like Wing Commander and Freelancer with a new coat of paint, new technology made for a new generation, and we'll build it from there. So the first pitch, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, they never said they were going to not have fauna or, take your pick, of little features that come or don't come in now, and you have to look somewhere else along the last 11 years of development to find out where was that actually mentioned. It's my point being, it's hard to nail down what it would mean for them to deliver their original pitch at this point. Because even if they went back to what they're saying right now, it changes because planets can be landed on, because Squadron 42 is not in the game anymore. So it's really jumbled up if what they were actually trying to deliver. But looking at these early things and the design documents that we see after this, you'll notice that generally the trend is we want to have a space game with consequence and choice and have it be immersive. Like, it just boils down to that, really.
Sort of detail and fidelity that I don't think is currently out there in other space games, certainly right now. One of the great things about Star Citizen is there are a lot of different roles you can play in it. You can be a mercenary, you can be a bounty hunter, you can be a merchant trader, you can be a pirate, and those all exist in game. Bounty hunting.
Kind of.
Designed and built a lot of different ships to sort of fill those roles in terms of, this ship's good for dogfighting, this ship's good for hauling cargo. Also, we have a lot of equipment that you can.
Oh God, I love all these ships. Like, this ship has its own new model.
And built.
Right? This ship has its own new model.
A lot of different ships
in game
to sort of fill
this ship has its own new model in game.
Roles in terms of, this
ship has its own new model in game.
Good for dogfighting. This ship's good for hauling cargo.
The fucking Starfarer still sucks. It actually does look different than this, but it still needs a better modeling game.
We have a lot of equipment that you can buy or you can find or you can acquire or you can upgrade in the game that will allow you to customize your ship for the roles you want to play. I think that's one of the most exciting parts of the game, is just that sort of free form and the amount of different things that you can do. And that's kind of what Star Citizen's about. And so
that's another good point, is the component customization was always supposed to be a big part of what made you progress in this game, not just the ships, but buying and I guess finding components that would customize that ship. And we're just now starting to see that. 10 years.
Really felt I wanted to come back and make a game that pushed PC hardware in the way that Wing Commander used to do in the old days.
Oh, it pushes our hardware.
Going to allow me to do a much more immersive.
That little dinky thing you're building there, Chris, that ain't gonna cover it. I'm sorry.
In the old days.
You gotta. Is that a hard disk drive you got there? Sorry, buddy, not gonna do. Is that one stick of RAM I see? No can do.
Power of today's PCs are going to allow me to do a much more immersive experience than I could ever do back in the 90s when I was making Wing Commander. The level of detail and graphical fidelity will just...
Seriously, what graphics card was that? Can anybody recognize that? It looks like a 10 series. Bet that's like a freaking 970 or 1080 or something that would just explode if it tried to run the game now.
The level of detail and graphical fidelity will just allow more functionality, a lot more detail in terms of the ships. So we can simulate the systems and the physics in a way that we never could before because we just didn't have the processing power. So we're supporting
this is
Oculus
2014,
Rift, which is this great VR headset. That's the sort of stuff that you just don't see happen frequently sort of in the console world. PC is in my DNA. I think it's the most interesting platform because it's always evolving, it's always challenging you, and it's going to allow us in 3 or 4 or 5 years' time to do totally different things with Star Citizen.
3 or 4 or 5 years' time. Gonna be doing different things. Hey, I'll say this, okay? They did do different things 3 years after this because we were landing on planets. It was pretty freaking cool. It was fairly novel in the game experience. But, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years later. You're doing cool stuff.
Because the hardware will move along and we can push it even further. If you love space sims, you love PCs, and you feel like this kind of game needs to happen more often, by backing now you're helping it happen. But more importantly to that, if you ever wondered how games are made, what's happening, by doing it now you're going to participate in that, you're going to see it. We have multiple updates.
Ain't that the truth?
On our dedicated site, the Robert Space.
Don't tell me why this page still looks the same too. Are you kidding me? It's like almost the same background. They've updated the website like 6 times since then, and this comlink page still looks the same. That's wild.
spaceindustries.com site, where we're describing what we're doing this week, how we built this ship, how we built this character, what our thinking is on this game mechanic or that game mechanic. So it's a real sort of insiders, behind the scenes view of the game development process. On top of that, beyond all this stuff I've talked about, we're going to be releasing parts of the game, modules of the game along the way. We're going to release the hangar module that is in August of 2013, and that module will allow you to walk around the ships that you've backed or pledged on the site, in the engine, see what they are, get inside them, check them out. Ultimately, we're going to enable multiplayer where other players can come in and check out your hangar. You can customize your hangar. This is where you'll be able to customize your ships eventually. And then in December, we're going to have the dogfighting module, which will be just standalone dogfighting in space. You can take the ships you have in your hangar and fight against other players.
Just where the date started?
Matchmaking. Or against AI, and you can practice and hone your dogfighting skills and give us valuable feedback in the balancing of the ships and the weapons. We can see how many players in one area is fun. So
what if during this video he was like, yeah, and then in December we're going to get the dogfighting module in there, and then you guys can get in there and fight each other and give us some feedback on master modes, and everybody's like, what? Like, what if he actually said master modes back then in this video? I would fall out of my chair.
If you want to be playing parts of the game, seeing how the game is developed, having your voice heard and having your feedback, then you should join now rather than wait.
Cool. So I think this was a great pitch. I think they had a great idea on their hands and it looked like things were going to go very well. Obviously, they had the mindset that it would be a few years. It was not. But now we're going to look at some of the more detailed stuff about what they were trying to say the game is going to be. Actually, now we're going back to the 2018 talk. So this is where we're going to get to those design documents, I promise. This is where we hear what he has to say 4 years after that video came out. He's now talking about kind of, okay, I've had some time to stew on this. I've let things get a little bit out of hand. We're going to come back, bring it in, and here is our road towards what we want to get you guys into the game and playing. So this is a little bit long. I don't want to play the whole thing here. But it's interesting to listen to this talk because specifically this was when they laid out the goal of server meshing, which we've just now started to see come to fruition like this month. So it's a nice little bit of hindsight to look back on this one.
game do things and it persists. So this universe is not a theme park.
I have sped this up a little bit, just a heads up.
This universe is a living, breathing universe that changes as players live in it and interact with it. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things. That's why we call it the persistent universe, is that it has a life and a persistence, and people's actions will mean something in it. And that's a very, very important part of the 11th pillar. And the last one, if we go forward, Paul, is server meshing. So when we get server meshing, that is, we think, the last piece of the puzzle to have the full game experience. And this is our ability to go, right now we have about 50 players on a server. We probably will be able to increase that number because of band culling and stuff, but it's still going to cap out at a certain level. With server meshing, we'll be able to get 2,000.
Can we just, wait, can we go back? What did he say? He said 50, right? We had 50 players at that time, if I'm not mistaken. When did it go from 25 to 50? Was that 3.0?
That is, we think, the last piece of the puzzle to have the full game experience. And this is our ability to go, right now we have about 50 players on a server.
I swear it sounds like it says 15, but yeah, it was 50 right after 3.0.
Probably will be able to increase that number because of band culling and stuff, but it's still going to...
They did get the number increased. I think it wasn't until after server-side OCS was in that they increased the player count. They went up to 75. I think in like 2021, 22 maybe. It was a little while after this. They didn't go up right away.
Cap out at a certain level. With server meshing, we'll be able to get to thousands of players playing concurrently in the same locations, star systems. They're not all going to be able to have 1,000 people dogpiling together. They won't be able to render it all at the same time, but you certainly will be able to have 1,000 people on the planet of Hurston, for instance. So the server meshing is the last key.
What he doesn't say is that's dynamic server meshing that we'll need that for. Because even if they applied static server meshing to the system we have now and made one server per planet, it'd still be like 100 people on a planet.
Piece, because that will allow us to have a truly massively populated universe of players as well as AI, and having servers that dynamically scale up and down to take care of the processing needs of that. And so from our standpoint, in terms of what we would think is the experience when you guys can sit in and play the game day after day and not worry about it getting wiped, not worrying about, I'm going to do something for a day or two and there's no point because they're going to reset the system. When we get to full persistence and server meshing, that's our marker. And sure, after that, we've got planets to do and star systems, and we're going to have continual feature development. But this is an online live game, and so for us, we don't have a particular viewpoint in terms of, that's it, this is where we finish it, and we don't do any more work. It's like literally, we kind of view, as long as you guys want to live in this universe, every 3 months, we're giving you a build, and here you are, and here's a bit more, and here's a bit more.
Got to get back to that.
When we get to the...
They got to get back to every 3 months reliably. That was actually nice, even though the features from 3.0 to probably like 3.17, they weren't always the best. It was still nice to consistently know that just the patch cycle was continuing to go along, and we were getting updates, and there was something new happening. Ever since PES and server meshing through that for a loop, it's been a little rough. Disagree that it was the right way? I'm not saying it was the right way, but I think it's a good way. There's probably a lot of different ways they could do it.
The full persistence and server meshing, I think at that point, that's when we're not going to be resetting the servers. It's when it will be an ongoing, living, breathing game. And that, I'm not going to give you a date, but... But you can watch on our roadmap.
That's right.
As we develop
Good job, dude. Such restraint.
And just watch for that, because us internally, those are what we view as our sort of cornerstones that we need to get to. And yes, there's a lot of other things that we've talked about that we're also working on. But when we get that, we feel like it will be a game like no other. So that is kind of what we, in terms of road to release. But speaking of near-term release.
Yeah. So that was your kind of just a reminder, I guess. From 2014 to 2018, there was a significant shift in how they talked about what the game needed to be good. You could tell, like the first video we watched, even this Imagine video, a lot of it is about like just the fun of it, the idea of being in the game and getting incorporated. But it was around 2017-ish or so where these questions of like, how is this actually being done, started to become more common outside of the company. I'm sure they were constantly scratching their heads and like, holy crap, we gotta get this networking stuff together. I remember they did some interviews with Gamer Nexus back in like 2015, and they did mention a lot of this stuff, so it was in their mind. But it wasn't until these Citizen Cons of 2017, 2018, and 2019 when they started to talk about persistence and server meshing to the community and tell them, hey, this is kind of the path that we need to follow to make sure this game works well. And I think this was when they were slowly letting people realize that like there's actually a decent amount more work that needs to be done for this. Even then, though, I don't think people realized, myself included, just how much more of that work there'd be. So now we can go to kind of how they were laying these out via their design documents. And these are, oh boy, these are eye-opening. Folks, if you're obsessed with Star Citizen, like if you find that you just can't get enough information about what it might be, even if you don't care if it's real, sometimes it's just fun to read the kind of like brainstorming and design ideas of the people making the game, because you still get a better idea of where the game is headed. This is the page for that. I guarantee this is like at least 5 to 10 hours, I would say, of like reading on all the details surrounding how the gameplay is supposed to work in Star Citizen. You could click into something like, let's say shields and management. Let's see what that's about. How was shields and management supposed to work in Star Citizen? Shields are an iconic part of science fiction drama. If there's a spaceship involved, chances are that shields are involved too. Whether someone is redirecting power to the forward shield or reporting to their commanding officer that shields are seconds away from failing, their existence has become an unquestioned piece of standard equipment in future worlds. This is a very telling paragraph. Chris is such a nerd. He's such a fucking nerd, dude. He like every time he talks about something he wants to be in the game, he talks about why it's going to be in the game. And it's like, I mean, because spaceships, right? And I love that. I think that's why a lot of people love his energy for these kinds of games. But it's also telling because this shows just how deep shields are going to be. They're talking about commanding officers, clearly multi-crew gameplay, shifting your shields around. Even the idea that you can tell when they're about to go out is like a very small design choice. Some games, it doesn't matter. You lose your shields and it's just like that. And you have to bounce back from that. But for a game that actually focuses on saying, hey, you're going to be in this state of almost losing your shields for multiple minutes, it tells you something about what they want the gameplay to be like. Hint: a little more slow. So here it says, in Star Citizen, shields react uniquely depending on the kinds of forces they are deflecting, with energy weapons being absorbed entirely, or with ballistic weapons simply being slowed to weaken the impact that does make it through. This was written 10 years ago, and it's what we just saw in 4.0 get added. Was it 4.0? Or did it get delayed to go with engineering? Maybe 4.1. We did see this though in the stream over the weekend when they were trying to shoot through the shields and it was still going through a little bit with the ballistics. Higher power shields specialize by splitting that output amongst multiple faces and by better deflecting splash damage. Okay. Here are some of the highest level shield variations we've been thinking of. Not all of these are built out, but it serves as a reference point when helping to figure out what makes that. What makes what? They've got military components, which we know are hard to get, stealth components, civilian components, race components, industrial components, and outlaw components. Not sure if that's still supposed to be a thing. Next, manufacturers were assigned to the high-level ideas. Military, stealth, civilian, racer, industrial, and outlaw-based manufacturers. Finally, they have variant styles like rapid charge, durable, direct damage cell, splash damage guard, second skin, hard light. They're not doing this like hard level variant on the shields, But I do believe that the various shield statistics are meant to have, like, some of them charge more rapidly and stuff like that. We've also seen this kind of stuff start to be built into crafting. So if you craft a certain type of component a certain way, it might charge faster or be more durable. Let's look at management of shields. This is probably a bit more relevant and a bit more interesting to us because it's something we're already experiencing, and it kind of factors into multi-crew capital ship engineering gameplay. They say current shield management is handled through the dedicated context of the CVI or on the multi-function displays. Here, one can redistribute the allocation of power to each of the various shield faces, as well as monitor the status of each shield face. Shield allocation is handled by positioning the allocation pips for both your ship's longitudinal and vertical axes. This is an interesting layout. I think what we have is a little better now, but it took a while to get there. Oh, actually, this is for shields, not power. I don't think we have something like this for the shields yet. Then they talk about shield management of tomorrow. Multi-crew shield management screen allows a support crew member to manage both the shield generators installed on the ship and any shield segments generated. The multi-crew shield management screen also allows for more granular control of the ship's shield generators. A mock-up of the shield management screen is included, which breaks down into individual pieces. So, multi-crew gameplay is a pretty important part of this overall, but you can see there's just so much stuff here about shields. I don't even know, why are they talking about social here? On larger ships, you will want to interact with a crew of friends and NPCs to balance shields as needed. Imagine your buddy reporting his shields has taken a hit and his turret is now unprotected, so you can reroute power to cover him quick. I think we're going to see a lot of these very stark reminders that NPCs on ships were very much a part of the plan for the initial Star Citizen, and it's disappointing. I'm not somebody who's really excited about NPC crew. I can care less. I'm mainly a solo player, or I'll play with my org if I want other people or things around, but as a pretty important part of the game, I think, for making ships function, every time I come by the idea of NPCs on ships, I'm like, that sucks. That hurts. Under the hood. Dude, like, how? How do you even type out this much stuff about shields? FPS shields, these are supposed to be things that we can deploy. So clearly also a big focus on FPS gameplay at the time. Beyond what we've discussed, here there are a number of improvements to the shield I can't talk today. The shield systems that we've started to consider. And while these designs aren't fleshed out yet, this is the perfect place to provide that first glimpse of what is to come. One such unexpected place is signature management. Among the necessary places for signature management is the relative signals of the environment and other objects that effectively give you something to hide behind. And that same system extends to help describe exactly how the local gases, radiation, or ion storms will affect your shields. This gives rise to the players having ways to push back against these adverse conditions, a new element to juggle when deciding how to manage those shields. Sometimes it will be enough to push all your shields towards the firefight, but sometimes you'll need to take into account how the weakness in one part of the system could affect the performance of the whole. Okay, they kind of got away from the signature stuff there, but yeah, ship signatures is a consequence we don't really have in game right now. I hope they talk about it more soon. So, I mean, how interesting is shields? Let's go back to the list overall and find something that maybe applies a bit more to what you guys are doing. Let's look at mining. Again, these are really detailed documents. I don't think they're going to hit this when it comes to the detail they're going for now. But if you're wondering why, and I'll say this, I'm wrong about a lot of stuff that have to do with Star Citizen, but if you're wondering why I've been able to make videos about what's coming to Star Citizen, or maybe what they've done about Star Citizen or where they're going, it's because reading these design documents is like almost a playbook for how the game is supposed to work. Even if they don't reach this level, you can tell what they're trying to do. And I think for a lot of people who want to know what Star Citizen is, this is the best way to find out, because if you read things like this, you'll find things like physicalized cargo, or a death of a spaceman, or having to fly from one place to another rather than fast travel. The kinds of things that people don't like in certain games, you will get if you at the very least, take these articles and plug them into ChatGPT or something and get the major points. This will do a wonder, I think, for setting expectations on the game. So here's the next bit of gameplay we're going over today. It's probably more interesting to a lot of other folks. Mining. We already do plenty of that. This one is written by Tony Zurovic. You all know Tony. Sleeping Tony, you call him. He's at CIG still, but he hasn't been in front of the camera in a long time for reasons that I've heard but cannot confirm. That being said, this is a look at how mining is meant to work on small, medium, large scale. I wouldn't, again, put too much into this still being completely true, but I think it'll say some interesting things about where it's headed. Let's jump down to like the more interesting bits. So first we'll say once a basic mining path, freelance, or contract has been decided upon, a player must put some thought into how they wish to locate the sought after materials. So mining doesn't start with cracking the rocks, it starts with finding them. Asteroid fields containing ore of varying purity levels litter most star systems, but prior to a miner engaging their quantum drive and making haste to begin extracting value from their environment, they must gain knowledge of those fields. To this end, every solar system contains a variety of information considered public knowledge, including the location of major asteroid fields. The entry-level miner often begins their career via heading towards such well-known sites, but as would be expected, the most valuable materials in such fields have typically long since been extracted. So, I mean, your public knowledge would probably be like popular sites around the Air and Halo belt or something, right? The remaining ore of value is often spread so thinly throughout a vast field that its retrieval requires more time and effort than more advanced miners are willing to endure. Valuable new fields are occasionally located and made known to the public, often resulting in a dramatic increase in mining activity, and soon thereafter a drop in prices on those materials contained in ample quantity within the field as players rush to exploit the freely available resources. Now, you can tell this is written by Tony because this has some very clear economic and simulation quantum connotations. Like this reeks of, in fact, check this out. Let's go to his presentation on quantum. I bet you can find the place where he literally shows this happening on screen. Here we go. This is the same guy who typed that out.
Be depleted. To demonstrate, I brought up a planet. Now I'm going to highlight the location of all of the gold ore. Players in Quanta, of course, would not have this information, and to represent that fact, I'm going to place a shadow over everything. You can see a single quant exploration ship approaching the planet from the right. As it travels across the surface, it will unveil the quantity and location of that ore, visually represented by removing the shadow, and then broadcast that information to other Quanta within its organization.
Okay.
It is discovered.
Hold on. Hold the phone. Let's just go back real quick to what that had said. Because he said, let's see. Valuable new fields will be occasionally located and made known to the public, often resulting in a dramatic increase in mining activity.
A huge vein of valuable ore, and quantum miners have now started arriving in mass to extract it. They're focusing predominantly on those areas where the concentration is known to be highest, although they'll also consider things like the amount of risk in a given area, perhaps caused by a player or NPC organization fighting to control that region. I'm running this at an accelerated rate, and you can see that the amount of ore at that first large site is declining rapidly. The explorer has now discovered a second field of gold ore near the equator, and because the original deposit has now been mined so extensively, what remains is more time-consuming and difficult to extract, and is thus relatively less attractive. The Quanta have figured this out, and most of them have started to focus their attention on the newer site. Taken together, these new features...
That is also, quite literally, the same thing he said here, where the remaining ore value is spread so thinly that its retrieval requires more time and effort than more advanced miners are willing to endure. So you can see the DNA of some of the people running this game, and he worked on Ultima Online, I think. He's had some experience in MMOs. You can see the DNA of some of the people who were working on this game early that creeps into both their video content, their design documents, even the feature releases. And what some people, myself included, I'm not gonna lie, I am curious at the very least, what some people are wondering is, with a lot of the changeover we're seeing at higher levels, from what was his name? Bug Smasher. Mark Abent. I always get Mark and the other guy mixed up, but he left. Todd Pappy, a few people, and so you do wonder how much of this kind of stuff that's being so emphatically pushed by people like Tony Z, how much of that gets lost in translation when you're trying to build a game, without that constantly being shoved in there. I don't think it's gone. I'm not saying that I think things have changed a lot, but like, it's undeniable that people like him have talked a lot about how they want this game to work, and the idea of how Star Citizen works, I think, is a little bit up in the air right now. No, yeah, so not Mark Abent, I'm sorry. It was Paul Jones. Paul Jones, not Mark Abent. Thank you. Is it confirmed that Tony still works there? We had some folks from our community who met him back in May, and he said he was still there. So let's continue. Miners may elect to employ the services of an information broker who, for a price, will offer the locations of a variety of smaller fields unknown to the public. So this is kind of like when you're not getting missions. This is going out to somebody and literally paying for data. Those who ask about exploration, this is why I always say it has a lot to do with resources. It's built into the DNA. While more reputable brokers will truthfully report the type and quantity of materials to be found within a particular field, there are some who may have been known to exaggerate the assets contained within a field whose location they are seeking to sell. I've got another reference for you. Let's go. It's a Space Tomato stream. What do you think's going to happen? We go back to the Pioneer announcement. The Pioneer announcement, you can actually find Tony talking about this very same thing. Again, it continues over and over. We come back to the same people who are clearly injecting their idea of how Star Citizen will work into the game over time. And even if it doesn't act exactly how they wanted it to work, you can see that these sorts of influences should inform you of what kind of game Star Citizen is becoming. It's not simple. It's not quick and easy. It is very much based on collaboration, consequence, and choice. Not to say you can't play it alone, but like, it's built in a certain kind of way. Listen to this.
About purchasing. If you're being asked to purchase a car and you haven't actually seen it, you're going to be very conservative in terms of your estimate of what it might be worth. If you're able to see it even from the exterior and verify there's tread on the wheels, the paint job looks okay, etc., then that's going to increase your perception of its value. If you're able to actually, turn the car on, make sure it's running, or better yet, have a mechanic, take a peek under the hood, then that's going to basically bring it, even farther up the scale. And so a lot of what we're doing, with the value of land, which ties over into the Pioneer, because you're going to be setting up these outposts ideally in optimal locations to exploit a lot of this value that's sitting on the surface of these planets. The next one up would be when the info was last verified. Knowing that there is, a vast abundance of gold at a particular area, but the information is stale. It's 2 weeks old, it's a month old, it's 6 weeks old. As it gets more out of date, it becomes less and less valuable. And so what this means is that players will routinely have to refresh, the knowledge of a particular area in order to maintain the perceived land value within the game. The last thing that I'd mention in regards to what constitutes knowledge is the value of location. If you've got a field of copper ore and it's in close proximity to a refinery, potentially.
Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Let's go back to here.
Now going to hand over to Tony.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Paul Jones. He's the one who left, not Mark Abent.
So before you can actually begin construction of your new outpost, you'll need to...
So just pretend, just replace everything he's saying about construction with mining.
To first select and purchase a plot of land. The value of that land, what you're going to have to pay in order to acquire it, depends upon a variety of objective criteria, as well as the seller's insight into that information, which we collectively refer to as knowledge. One of the things that we track for each section of land that you can potentially purchase is the resources present and the quantity. Another one is the current market value, which will obviously impact the value of the land.
You build it and you find it.
All right. Here's another reference to this stuff from him.
Exploration ships are really sort of...
Make sure that there's a lot of gameplay associated with these high-level concepts. And by that I mean, if you discover, if you're working your long-range scanners, you may find a previously unknown body, an asteroid that no one else within the system knows about, and there is a level of value related to that. If you work
It's exploration gameplay.
your dials a little bit, and you've got the proper equipment and the skills, then without actually having to make the journey, you could increase the potential value of that that knowledge find by being able to discern the mass of the object. A large asteroid is going to be, all things being equal, be worth more than a smaller asteroid. But if you really want to ratchet it up, and this kind of goes back to the degrees of knowledge that I was talking about, if you actually make the journey to it, fly over, burn fuel, burn time, brave whatever dangers are between you and there, and you actually do a flyover the surface, then you may actually just visually see pools of hydrocarbons, gas venting from the surface, and again that raises up what you know about it all the more. If you really want to get specific about what's there and maximize the potential value of that find, though, then you're going to have to set down on the surface, and you're actually going to take core samples, and you're going to basically have these processed, analyzed, and you're going to do things like seismographic surveys and have et cetera, et cetera. And so all of this plays into a common theme that we're trying to execute upon, which is all of these high-level ideas.
Just note who else is sitting at the table. By the way, Todd Pappy introduced base building to the public last year, so he's talking about base building. This is 5-7 years prior to them actually revealing it. 6 years prior, but there's. Again, people are significant, I think.
Ideas and stuff have a variety of different ways by which the player community can basically attack them, and by which these things will feed, the outputs of one into the inputs of another.
So now that
Okay.
high-level idea of what.
Yeah, so that I just wanted to go over that because that's, again, it basically mirrors exactly what he's saying here. About, you're going to find information brokers. Some of them might be reputable. Some of them actually know the type and quantity of the material, while other ones may have just found out there's an asteroid, got that information, and bugged off. And that's exploration gameplay being built into things like base building and mining. And you can see, again, that's where the game was headed. It's always headed in this direction of interlinking all the gameplay together so that people needed to depend on other people. Not forcing you into it. You don't have to. You can just go to a store. But in terms of when you do go out with the idea of playing with other people, you can find other people that do entirely the thing that you're not doing, but still assists what you're doing. And I think that was a big part of Star Citizen, always and still is. Okay, the last and most important part, but also potentially the most lucrative for those those able to master another discipline in terms of finding an asteroid field to exploit, is to simply act as a pioneer and find your own. The pioneer occupation, they probably don't want to use that word. The pioneer occupation specializes in the utilization of long-range scanners and telemetry probes to scan huge swaths of space and find anomalies that warrant further investigation, with the end result that some turn out to be small fields of asteroids, occasionally with an attractive mix of valuable materials embedded within them. When acting in such a capacity on your own, and not as an agent in the employ of another entity, basically when you're not taking a mission, the discovery of something remains known only to you. In such cases, you may elect to sell such information to a broker. with the price being dictated by the type and quantity of material within the field as well as the current market rates, who would then offer that information to others. Don't know how they would facilitate that. I'm thinking when you are selling this info, it's just going to be like some kind of flat rate from the space station you're around. But this is exploration gameplay they're laying out here. So exploration, mining, base building, all these things meant to coincide with each other and interact. But once you get deeper into how it all's supposed to work, it starts to get a little confusing compared to where we are now. Let's look at this part. Exothermic reaction detector. Every mineable material has its own unique set of parameters dictating how much energy a given quantity can absorb, how quickly it can dissipate energy, how easily it can transfer excess energy into the surrounding materials, its probability of fragmentation as energy levels reach critical levels, and numerous other things. This is actually, I would say, exactly what we do. The average size of the fragments carved from an asteroid as the result of a mining beam being utilized then depend upon the amount of wattage the beam is injecting into the body, as well as the type of materials into which the energy is being directed. That'd be a nice detail to include. Not sure if that's the case right now. But you can step further to the laser seismometer. It shows each individual tremor within an asteroid, as well as the superposition of the various waves. It also shows the vibrational thresholds for any seismically sensitive materials contained within the asteroid, assuming that an RMAP has been successfully injected. Explosions that occur as the result of a seismic event are often considerably more dangerous than chain reactions that consume a quantity of material in a localized area because they will cause all such material within the entire asteroid to detonate. This is definitely written by Tony. This is such a long sentence, man. With the end result often being the complete destruction of the asteroid and a pronounced danger to any mining ship fortunate enough to be in close proximity at the time. So we don't have that yet. Here's an analytical materials processor. We do have this. It tells you kind of what's in the asteroid. Cargo operator. The cargo operator utilizes a console on the bridge of the ship that allows them to monitor a camera mounted within the forward-facing input port. From that vantage point, the cargo operator can view the impact area of the mining beam, as well as the various asteroid fragments that are broken apart from the parent body and ejected out into space. The input port contains a powerful crusher that quickly reduces any incoming asteroid fragments to rubble and stores them in attached cargo modules for transport or, on ships with an integrated refinery, subsequent processing into their purified elemental forms. You could kind of have something like this, but the game is so bad at handling cargo sacks that they don't really work. The cargo operator directs a targeting cursor towards a fragment of interest with an integrated fragment scanner. Okay. They control the attractor and repulsor beam generators, typically mounted just within or outside the input port, and the magnitude of the force generated by each can be precisely controlled so as to allow for intricate modification and control of a fragment's trajectory. This is just a tractor beam operator. So what this is telling us, what mining is showing us, is basically just the operator modes, right? Because you're going to have the piloting operator mode, you have the scanning operator mode, you have your mining beam, which your mining beam is basically has this built in because it tells you what's going on with your heat. We don't have a laser seismometer. We do have this processor, right? Constant feedback as to what type of material lies beneath the surface. It is kind of like the scanner. And then this is just your tractor beam operator. Refining operator is going to be the person who's down in the bottom of the galaxy refining stuff as it comes through. So actually they've built out mining more than I thought. I think it just needs some more detail built in. And these things need to be more distinct, I think, in the game. Okay, selling your cargo, final step. We all sell cargo. But what does this tell us? What does mining tell us from this design document? It tells us that you are supposed to have multiple people on your ship, that you're going to have multiple jobs that have to do with mining, that you will have the ability to go to a planet or an asteroid, that you can find various materials. It tells us a lot that I think are mostly true at this point, but one of the big things it does, it tells us, is just that there's more to it than just one position. That there is a pilot. There's also a scan operator and a beam operator. Like, you have to either do all of these things or find someone to do them. And you can't do all of them from one seat. And this is probably one of the biggest hanging points for Star Citizen as a game. And a lot of people who are joining it more recently is they want to do all these things from one seat. And they don't want there to be this idea of different roles for different people. It removes the ability to play the game more effectively solo. And it makes the game play a little slower if you're playing solo. But they've clearly taken a path that depends on this idea of ships having multiple functions, and they've been on it for like 10 years. I don't think they can just switch away from it at this point. Let's look for another thing. How about, is there a maintenance one? Yeah, ship repair and maintenance. Check this out. It was a long-winded way to describe current mining, yeah. I think a lot of it was part of the current mining stuff. Like, they're getting pretty close to what they laid out in the design document, which is kind of surprising, actually. They just have to, like, tell us or define for us what the Orion's going to do. Is the Orion just all of it combined? Or is it actually going to do something different with the rocks? Okay. Ship repair and maintenance. Let's see what this has to say about the idea behind Star Citizen. This is November 2015, so about 10 years ago at this point, a little less than 10 years ago. They say space is a hostile place and even the most skilled pilots will need to have their craft patched up from time to time. Unfortunately, there are a number of options, fortunately, there are a number of options available to citizens to get themselves back up and running. Star Citizen's repair system works in conjunction with the engine's detailed damage model to create intuitive and engaging gameplay for players wishing to pursue a career in ship repair or for pilots to execute quick field repairs. The basis for repair technology in Star Citizen are tools equipped with multi-purpose lasers that can trim away damaged materials or sinter construction material injected onto a component's frame, rebuilding its structure. I'm curious from your guys' perspective, Twitch chat. That's right. I see you all. Over here on your second monitor, real quick, I got a question for you. Do you think that Star Citizen could have done a better job of delivering the messaging on what engineering is? Because engineering is so closely related to repair stuff. And I read this paragraph where they're like, oh yeah, this is going to allow for players who want to pursue a career in repair and also for pilots to execute their own repairs. And like, it seems like everybody who is getting angry about engineering is missing the fact that, or they're focusing on the idea that engineering makes flying more difficult, and they're not really listening to the possibility that it lets you do your own field repairs, which is huge in this game. And I think that maybe if CIG had just come out and led a little bit differently, maybe from the repair side of things rather than the maintenance side of things, they could have co-opted the narrative. Because it seems like people find one thing to focus on when it comes to like a new feature releasing, and then that thing just kind of takes the narrative of that thing, and there's not much conversation around other parts of it. We saw it with salvage. We saw it with whatever the heck I was just talking about. We saw it with cargo hauling. We saw it with I was talking about engineering. We saw it with master modes. Like, you find it hard to talk about other parts of it because the conversation just gets ripped away. And the conversation around engineering. Boy. Anyways, their idea for repair was that any ship with repair capabilities would have two roles. Two roles that must be filled to ensure a successful repair. The repair arm operator and the repair task manager. The arm operator is responsible for the control of the robotic repair arm, mounted with a multi-purpose laser and material injector system. Fear not, folks, we're keeping with the lasers. It's Beam Citizen. The repair arm is capable of carrying out all manner of repair tasks. The arm is the only player-controlled method of fully restoring a ship to 100% health, but requires skill, knowledge, and coordination with the repair task manager. I don't know if it's I think what they're probably gonna end up doing is make this one roll, and the task manager just shows up on the UI of your repair arm. But back then, the task manager relayed detailed damage information to the arm operator, designating repair tasks to be undertaken and allocating materials to satisfy the reconstruction. Yeah, this sounds like a one-person job with the way Star Citizen is right now. One of the things you all think also isn't clear in the current game is they talk about your ship lasting a lot longer than they do currently. They want to get rid of the current soft death, and you can increase your ship life with repairs and engineering, but people just see the upkeep aspect. Yeah, it basically means that you can have a permanent home. Like once we gain repair and engineering, we lose the idea of, oh, I'm going to put this on my ship, but once it blows up, I just have to buy it again. Now it's like, I'm going to put this on my ship and I'm going to keep my ship alive so that I never have to buy it again. I'm sure there's going to be bugs and it's not going to work perfectly the first quarter or second quarter or third, fourth, fifth, or sixth quarter. But the idea that the game is preparing us to be able to do that is a good change to it. All right, damage assessment as a repair gremlin. Whilst using their terminal, the repair task manager can assess the target ship's damage diagnostics. This displays the status of ship parts, the hull, systems, weapons, and their various connections. The player can toggle and filter between various layers, isolating and displaying their respective elements. This is complicated, and this is one of the things that we've seen less of in the game so far. Damage that has been dealt to a ship's hull is represented in an AR overlay as a heat map. No damage displays as green. Full damage in holes as red, and partial damage on a gradient in between. We're kind of seeing that with salvage. Highlighting the various parts will display its current health, as well as the materials required to repair it. When ready to start a repair job, the task manager selects the desired part, opening the material panel. Kind of like the material, yeah, sounds a little bit like the engineering panel, you're right. So we're seeing a little bit of this with the new repair tool that's coming in, but it's not detailed and technical just yet. This panel, though, I think this is the craziest thing that they typed out in the design document. But, I mean, I thought it was the craziest thing. And then they introduced crafting. And now I guess they're actually going to do this or something like it. This is the repair panel, but this really applies to engineering, crafting, base building, ship building, anything that has to do with elements in the game will be here. Repairs taking place in a workshop require the consumption of the raw construction materials gathered through mining, scavenging, and trade. The repair task manager can assign different materials according to the repair task at hand via their console's material manager or panel. Depending on the repair job, certain types and quantities of material are required. When a component is selected, these requirements are displayed in the repair command section, compound section of the material panel as slots that need to be filled from the repair ship's material stock. Each material is graded to reflect how effective it is when assigned to a slot and how it will affect the repair procedure. To get optimum results, the task manager must balance the arm operator's requirements versus the value of the materials used. So this is basically saying everything is going to correspond to an element, and we're seeing that being built out. I mean, you can go to any website that tracks the stuff in the game and you can find gold, hadanite, there's all kinds of elements in here now. Bioplastics, beryl, there's iron, there's copper, quartz is there, carbon, all kinds of stuff that they are building out to make sure that the game has a fully supported elemental table, because this all plays into crafting. I didn't realize it did, honestly. Up until last year, I was like, I don't think they're going to do this still. I think they're probably just going to make a few materials and then that's it, CMC, RMC, and a couple others. But then we saw this. Slot. And I guess everything kind of changed about that. So the idea that you'll actually be able to not just repair ships via the materials that they need, but also salvage ships and get certain materials from those ships that they're made of is going to be a thing. And they laid out the idea of this all the way back then, kind of giving us the sense that this was going to become a complex game and that there was going to be a lot to take in and understand. Here they're talking about reconstruction, which is basically building back the frame. There's a lot here. They talk down here about the personal multi-tool, a personal item that is equipped with the capabilities of a small-scale version of the repair arm. We have that already. It is capable of stripping and patching, allowing it to achieve a wide variety of ship repairs short of full part reconstruction. So this is something we're already doing in the game. Although the multi-tool's repair abilities are the same as that of the repair arm, the size of the laser and low quantity of repair material it can store means that it's only suitable for quick fixes and patch jobs to get a ship back to proper repair facility. I'm actually hearing that with 4.0.1, the update that's in testing in PTU right now. These are full-on missions. Like, you can go into your mobiGlas, you can find a mission, and an outpost will call you, tell you to come through, salvage some material for yourself, and then use it with your multi-tool to repair a part that's broken on their site. So we're starting to see these field repairs come into the game. Down here, they're talking about component damage. When your ship takes damage, some of that damage will be transferred from the point of impact on the hull to the nearest system and weapon component. This is something that they're talking about with engineering, and we've seen it. I think they showed it off. Well, we kind of get this already in Arena Commander, but we know it's coming with engineering, probably with 4.1. So it's just a lot of these early things that they used to talk about are hitting right now, 9 years later. Those components will then redistribute their damage between themselves and whatever subcomponents are attached inside. Y'all know subcomponents as relays. Those are our first subcomponents. The life support system also has subcomponents. Not sure what those are though. In general, subcomponents are the various consumables that will be used to run or improve a component or system's behavior. In general, component field repairs consist of turning off whichever component is having problems, replacing the broken subcomponents, and turning components back on. In very large components, like those found in capital ships, there may be multiple actions involved in turning a component on or off, including rerouting power or coolant to other parts of the ship. These actions may also involve the use of an onboard ship computer. All this sounding very, very ridiculously familiar. I got another reference here I can probably pull up. This is...
We got
you got some flowers? Oh. This is 20... Crap, I don't know when this file's from. This is potentially 2020 or 2019. But this is just, I'm just bringing this up to show that like subcomponents didn't just get mentioned all the way back here in 2015 and then come back up again in 2025. This is midway through when they're developing them.
And aside each one, you'll see a destroyed state. The idea is that over time, these become worn and eventually destroyed. That's why you need to replace them. So each one has its own broken variant.
And there's some more
here.
here
From the inside the interior here that the sub-items are quite dense and complex in design, especially when compared to the exteriors. Another thing that's quite important to us is brand identity. So
I actually don't know if they're going to do subcomponents in the components we know. You know, our power supply, our quantum drive, that kind of stuff. I don't know if they're still doing this. These are definitely, obviously, the relays have these. They're subcomponents of the fuses. And life support has subcomponents they've talked about, but it might be the case that they've just decided to do this with various certain components rather than every single one. But we might still see this happen with all of our components, and it would just build in more ability for customization and damage in ships, really. So that's talking about subcomponents, and they mentioned them here. They talked about a few. Power conduit, we know that one is our, I believe this is our relay now. Allows components to perform better for the same amount of power. Oh no, these are the ones that would go inside of a component. Okay, so power conduit, coolant drive or rod, EM insulator, heat sink. These are the kinds of things that would help with your signature. Capacitors would help with power. You can see a lot of the things in here spread throughout the development, not necessarily inside of subcomponents, but they're finding ways to work them in. That is interesting. Also got module racks they talk about here, which is basically just the component racks. Components on larger ships such as the Idris or Retaliator can require a large number of subcomponents to function. When damaged, these complicated systems can take significantly longer to diagnose and physically swap out any compromised subcomponents. So, taking all of that, bringing it back, they're just once again reminding us that while you are going to have to remember that your ship is a functioning vehicle that can receive damage, that you can do field repairs on, that have working components that allow you to customize your ship, make it run differently, make it be more invisible or visible, your multi-tool, your handheld tool, all these things can help you keep things running. It also comes back to capital ships and large multi-crew vessels where we want multiple players to be able to do these things separately across the same ship. Every single document that they have here continues to push the same ideas of physical interaction, immersive design. Some would say tedium, like you can call it that, tedium, just things taking longer and taking a little bit more work than a simple button press. I think that's what brought a lot of people to the game in the first place. Let's look at another one though. Let's take a look at fuel mechanics, medical gameplay. Chris Roberts on multiplayer, single player, and instancing. You know, I don't think I've read this one. This is a long one. Let's see. I get a lot of questions about how the whole persistence universe works and what I mean when I talk about battle instances. So this is over 12 years ago now. We're hearing like very base level what was Star Citizen supposed to be. I've given some answers, but as it keeps coming up, I thought I would give it would be good to give all of you a longer description in how this all works and fits together. Okay, one of my goals with Star Citizen was to create a huge open world you could adventure in solo with your friends, mingling with NPCs and other people. It's key. There are supposed to be other people. Freelancer was built to have 128 players in multiplayer, but as a few of you know, that was more a theoretical maximum than something that was really practical, especially back in 2003. When I started building Freelancer, partly inspired by the work done on Ultima Online, okay, so he was working at Origin while they were building Ultima, but he wasn't working on Ultima. The fun I was having playing multiplayer games like Command & Conquer and Diablo, I had wanted to bring the privateer experience into the bold new world of multiplayer. With Star Citizen, I'm determined to combine what I wanted to achieve with Freelancer with the personal experience that I wanted with Wing Commander and Privateer. But being me, I wanted to combine things I wanted to combine things I like about the promise of an MMO, but avoid the aspects that I'm not so keen on, like splintering player groups, griefing, and grinding. I also was really impressed with how Demon's Souls merged the single player experience with the multiplayer side. So he's not really filtering. He's letting it all out about what he wanted to do. All of this helped me form my thinking of how Star Citizen is going to balance the difficult balancing act between single player and multiplayer. See, I think this has mostly been lost throughout. Not the sense that there's no single player in the game, but they were so focused on the idea that there was like a full score. No, actually, you know what? I take that back. Because just like we were talking about, they're still clearly trying to build a single player storyline. Like they know who their audience is. People keep saying, Star Citizen, you're going to alienate all your people because you're not making content for solo players. I please just take a second and think about if they're really genuinely not trying to make content for solo players. They're going to make content for solo players, and I guess this kind of still rings true. When they split up Squadron 42, it was a bit up in question, but it's basically playing out like this. He said all multiplayer games, whether they are persistent world massively multiplayer or like World of Warcraft or online multiplayer like Battlefield 3, have a limit to the number of players that can be active in any one area or level. This number is usually inversely proportional to the amount of data that needs to go between the client and server. For a game with complex physics and a fully destructible terrain like Battlefield 3, the number of players that can be active in an instance is less than a game with less real-time fidelity like World of Warcraft or EVE Online. It says EVE Online. It doesn't say EVE Online. But in all cases, there are always more players than there are any one server instance can handle. I butchered that sentence, let's just go with it. For a persistent multiplayer world like WoW, the solution is to split up the player base into more manageable groups called shards, which are permanent instances of a universe that look after a certain amount of players. One thing I don't like about most MMO structures is the fragmentation of the player base between these shards. If you had joined much later than a friend of yours, there may not be room on his world instance anymore, and you have to join another parallel one and so cannot play together. This is one of the nice things about EVE Online design. Everyone plays in the same universe. In Star Citizen, there's going to be one persistent universe server that everyone exists on, so you will never be separated from your friends, and if you want, you'll be able to join up and adventure together. You can. Okay, so they're still trying to do this. They still say this is the goal, but I think we can pretty emphatically say that they're not going to hit the same level of all-togetherness that Chris wanted way back when he was writing this. And that is something that people should expect. I'm not saying, you know, it's definitely not going to have one shard for everyone, but everyone should set their expectations that we would at least have regional shards in this game. Let's see. An illustration of how Star Citizen would work is like this. I start out planetside on New Pittsburgh. I decide to buy a few tons of steel to fly to the shipyard on Terra. I'm currently in the hands of the Galaxy server that communicates with my client and handles my purchases and interactions on the planet, as these are not real time in the manner that the space action is. We render these in manner of Freelancer as detailed 3D environments where we see a third-person view of our character in a location, and we can click on non-player characters or terminals to buy, sell, upgrade your ship, hear gossip, hear about a mission, and so on. You'll also be able to interact with other players via a chat interface. We haven't fully worked out the player avatar handling planet side, but the bar or private clubs will be where you can meet and chat with other players. So what he's describing here is much less detailed than what we have, and I think this actually is important to remember when we mention the whole single shard thing isn't happening. They've gotten way more detailed than this. Not only that, you can see here, he's like, we haven't fully figured out how player avatar handling planet side is going to work. Because we weren't going to have player avatars planet side. Like, we were going to be in cities, but there wasn't going to be exploration outside of the cities. There was no planet surfaces. Even the cities themselves would be a lot smaller, kind of hubs. So part of the reason that they can't do what they originally wanted to do is because they've expanded far past that. But it's still something to keep in mind. Besides populating the bar with NPCs, the game will also populate the bar with other players. If there are more players planet-side than there are slots of avatars in the bar, the ones visible to you will be based off your friends list, and then it will be based off relevance to you. A player looking for a wingman, one from a similar group, or maybe someone that you've been given a mission to find or hunt. So this is interesting because they're talking about instances. He's basically saying that the city area would be instanced. If we can't put enough players in the city with you, you would only see people who are match made to be in that particular instance with you. Trying to think of how that would work with server meshing. I mean, that's how a regular MMO works, right? It's weird to talk about server meshing where everybody is all together and then say, well, if we can't get everybody into the bar, you'll only be able to see certain players. Let's go back to where he was describing this. The way it works is that the persistent universe server, which we're calling the Galaxy server, keeps track of all player assets, group relationships, and locations inside the Star Citizen universe. As the Galaxy server isn't handling any real-time action, it can handle our complete player base, which right now would be about 45,000 players. But is designed to be able to scale to millions if need be. The other key thing the Galaxy server does is dynamically place players based on their location, skill level, alignment, and player versus player preference into battle instances. Think of a battle instance like a Battlefield 3 multiplayer session or a World of Tanks battle, with the key difference that the selection of players isn't done transparently and is in fiction. Okay, so you just wouldn't Done in fiction. I don't know what he means by done in fiction, but I've not read this before. Sounds like the replication layer. Kind of. This actually sounds like the fleet instances they talked about at CitizenCon. Like, this sounds kind of like instancing because it seems like the same location. They're basically going to put you into a battle multiplayer session in an area outside of... Oh my gosh. This is such a key part of detail. I don't think I was aware of this idea of the Galaxy server. And now that we're reading this, what they talked about at the Star Citizen 1.0 panel makes more sense. To be quite honest, and I think a lot of other people were always under the impression that they wanted their server meshed environment to encompass all of the game rather than just like the main segment. It makes the game feel a little bit more like a traditional MMO. Let's go back to what he was saying he'd be doing. So he'd be seeing a full list of players in the room. If there are players that other players can join in, if there are open slots. Having bought my cargo, I launch into space. If there are players already in orbit, there will be an orbit instance already created. Dude. So this is confusing because they're not talking about server meshing here. He is saying that he wants there to be a single universe structure, but he's still talking about the game being instanced in certain areas. If there isn't an orbit instance created around the planet, and again, this is before we had transitions up to space, so I guess this is kind of like what Starfield plays like, is the idea. This is like if Starfield was an MMO, it'd probably be kind of like what he's describing here. So he's saying if the orbit instance is not full, then you'll be placed into it with other people. If it is full, then a new orbit instance will be dynamically created. All orbit and battle instances reserve slots for friends and persons of interest, which can be NPCs or other players. So if you've launched and there are multiple orbit instances and you have friends already in orbit, you should be placed into that instance. So Star Citizen itself was never going to be a one world for everybody kind of. They kept saying that, and maybe over the time of hyping the game up, they started to use that kind of marketing more. But at least in this initial explanation, it's definitely describing a game in which you would like go into an instance when you reached an area. More like they shackled themselves by not using instances. Other games are doing a lot more instances. I guess I just don't view what CIG has done as expanding where it's limited development. I don't know how else to say that. Going from planets not being explorable to planets being explorable is an expansion. You might be using a different definition of expansion. I'm talking about like the literal functionality of it. The idea of being able to hop outside of a city wall into the nearby location is an expansion. You can call it a change if you like, if expansion doesn't work for you, but it changes the way the game works. And that's why they've done things differently. Your friends will be prioritized in your instance, fixing the issue with instancing or having different shards. Yeah. I also don't think they are not using instances. They're talking very, 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 very openly here about using instances. This document itself is talking about instancing. The hangars use instances. The habs use instances. They're talking about dungeons for instances. They're not skipping that. His one shard idea seems focused on being able to play with your friends and everyone's actions being able to affect one single world regardless of some activity being instanced when you do them. Yeah, I think that sounds about right, Rasak. It sounds almost like, I can't believe that they're actually kind of sticking to it. This document makes it sound like they wanted a sandbox MMO with a bunch of theme park attractions attached to it, which is kind of what they're building. It sounds like they wanted to have a general open space where you could slide in and out of servers when you're flying around doing random stuff with your friends, but then you could also go to closed locations that kind of have packaged gameplay that you can take part in. I like the more open version they've created with the Planet Tech and stuff, but I am kind of surprised how closely they're still sticking to this idea. I didn't know this was here. This is the one design docu that I've always missed. Okay, once in orbit, I can pull out my navigation computer and set a course for my destination. If it's several systems away like Terra, the nav computer will chart a course. Okay, that's not that crazy. Once I've plotted my nav course, I would then engage autopilot. Yes, please. Head towards my first waypoint on the path to my destination. At this point, I've been handed back to the Galaxy server, which, yeah, we get that, which is determined whether I will encounter a hostile, someone that has tagged me as a POI, or a predetermined encounter on the way, or if I'm going to run across ongoing battle instances that is relevant to me. Which is kind of like how Elite Dangerous does it. When you're flying around in Elite, you can just like see a point of interest that acts as like a battle instance and you drop into it. I didn't think that's what they wanted to do with Star Citizen, to be honest. These encounters would be with an NPC or a live player and are sorted on skill level, and also, which is important to all of you, that like a more single player experience and don't want to deal with griefers, based on your player versus player preference, you'll see more players or not. So if you've set your game settings to be low PvP and you're in a relatively safe area, you'll likely have an NPC encounter as opposed to a PvP one. Of course, your ranking... Okay, see, I know for a fact that that's wrong, because he clarified the PvP slider thing. Crap. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find that. Starchives to the rescue. The idea of the PvP slider was not to be player facing. It was supposed to be dev facing. Well, that's what they say later. Maybe they couldn't stick to it. Here it is. Todd Pappy talks about it.
You know, it could be, yeah, and I think with that, it's, again, you know, I like there being tension within the game. You know, it could be very low, you know, tension, but I still want there to be that tension, right, you know, there. So something could pop off, and then you have to deal with, you know, the circumstances at that time. So, you know, that's...
Oh, and then the PvP slider is an internal tool instead of a forward-facing tool for the players. Yeah. Used to determine what type of missions and everything that are available to it. It's almost like, seems like a reputation meter, sort of like if you get higher PvP reputation, we provide you more PvP opportunities, basically. And if you have a lower PvP reputation, then we provide you more PvE opportunities. Correct.
It's kind of, yeah, it's a rep thing. It's both a rep thing and it's also a like, look where you are. A big part of it is also security. Like they want to make sure that they are rewarding people for being in places where they're playing as expected. So like if you are somebody who wants that kind of gameplay, it would be expected that you go to a certain place, and then the game would allow for that kind of gameplay to happen more, as opposed to a place where it's not supposed to happen. The game would hopefully, at least as far as we would like, basically insta-kill people for doing the wrong thing, right? He says, the advantage of this is to tailor the experience towards your preference. Solo, co-op, or full PvP. It also doesn't partition you into different parallel versions of the Star Citizen universe, as everyone is kept on the persistent server. This is a really important part of the game, and it's why they're never going to make PvE servers. People keep wanting them to make PvE, PvP servers. They're adamant on making sure that people are together, not because they want you to die, because like a combined universe allows for more gameplay opportunities even outside of combat. Because our battle or orbit space instances are temporary, you're never stuck with one group over the long term, and due to our heavy emphasis on friends and co-op, there will always be room for your friends to join you on your adventure, whether it's against or other players or NPCs. The same instance system underpins the single-player Squadron 42. If you're playing offline, your computer will be acting as the server and client. There will be no opportunities for friends to join, and everyone will be an NPC. But if you play Squadron 40, yeah, see, this is changed for sure. So that, I guess, lays out like a big part of what they expected with the game. And like we've looked at sort of mining and salvaging and just different aspects that they had planned. And you can see that a lot of the game that we're getting now was laid out back then in different ways. And I think we might have lost and gained some things along the way for sure. But they're trying to stick to an idea of Star Citizen, which is live in a connected game in space with a lot of other people, and have a very strong illusion, at least, that you're persistent with all those other people. And I think their biggest challenges are the persistence of all of those different things that they have, and maintaining the illusion that we're all together. Persistent entity streaming and server meshing, of course, who would have thought? But I don't know how it's gonna go. I don't think that they're gonna hit that one shard for everybody kind of thing. But I think it's definitely gonna be a unique experience, just from the gameplay itself, but also from the design and the format. What do they say Star Citizen is? I was going to say they're not telling people what's in the game. Trade, mine, salvage, fight. Race. Explore. Fall through the ground.
Nice work.
Why do I feel like they threw that together pretty quickly? All right, folks, I'm about done. I hope that this was an explanation for you about what Star Citizen is supposed to be, what it was supposed to be, like what they were trying to make it. And there's a lot of context to see sort of where it is and where it's going. Things are certainly changing, and we're at a very crucial point, I think, for Star Citizen. But a lot of the systems they've talked about that they wanted for this game seem to be starting to make a bigger difference and getting folks to, or getting things into the game that people care about more. So we'll see where it goes this year. I don't really know what to expect for this year, to be honest, but I think that we're in an interesting place, to be sure. And I hope that this helped you understand a bit more about what Star Citizen is supposed to be, or at the very least give you some more like content to look at and know about that you can point other people towards when they're asking questions.